Hello, I'm Eric Holdeman, and this is Disaster Zone, a show about emergencies and disasters that can happen anywhere and at any time. Today's show is with Barbara Endicott-Popovsky, Director for Information Assurance and Cybersecurity for the University of Washington. The topic for this program is higher education in the career field of emergency management and Homeland Security. And Barbara, thanks for being on the program today. It's great to have you here. There's a lot of interest in emergency management education, so I think it'd be great.
The program that I'm responsible for in infrastructure planning and management really had its beginning with Homeland Security. And this happened after 9/11, when obviously we needed to pay attention to things we never had to think about before. And Homeland Security, through a grant through the local Washington National Guard, funded the development of this curriculum.
Okay.
And the idea was that we would look at critical infrastructure in light of threats to the homeland. And this was kind of a new day, because all my life we've had two oceans that protect us, but that's not the case anymore. And with our infrastructure being accessible over the internet through public networks,
Right.
believe me, anyone, anywhere in the world could potentially get at our infrastructure. This is a new world.
Okay.
And so the degree was designed to look at infrastructure, look at maintaining that infrastructure. How do we upgrade it for the 21st century? How do we take into account this new cyber piece? How do we prepare and plan for it when our infrastructure now is so interconnected? It no longer is confined by geopolitical boundaries.
Right.
Used to be a city or a county, but that's not the case. It's interconnected now.
Right.
So how do you deal with regions when you have different geopolitical entities that have rules and regulations and governing bodies? And so this degree was designed to look at infrastructure from that perspective.
Okay. Well, I think it'd be interesting for the people to understand your personal background. What do you have a PhD? You're a
Yes.
professor at the University of Washington. So
Guilty
what
as
is
charged.
Yeah. What's your personal background academically? Yeah.
Well, my doctoral degree is in computer science. Prior to that, I had two master's degrees, one in information management and then a regular MBA, the MBA from the University of Washington. But I'm going to confess to a bachelor's degree in English literature.
Oh, well, that's
so
all good.
in the
That's good.
days of my youth, when I wasn't worried about making a living,
Yes.
I thought it would be really great to be a specialist in medieval poetry.
Chaucer.
I did. I loved it. Beowulf, Chaucer, all of that.
Yeah.
But making a living was an imperative, so I became interested in computers, information management. My degree in computer science, I went back after many years to get my doctoral degree in computer science, and it was motivated by what I was seeing in my consulting practice and what I'd seen in industry.
Okay.
We were embracing technology, and by the way, I'm not a Luddite, but we were embracing technology with wild abandon and not thinking about the unintended consequences. And I was fascinated by cybersecurity and fascinated by the fact that society has lagged comprehension of what we've done to ourselves by having this ubiquitous computing. And so that led to my going back for my PhD and ultimately to working at the University of Washington in cybersecurity.
Okay. And when did you see cybersecurity become as important? I mean, we see it become more and more visible today, but when did that aha moment come about for you personally, or?
Well, I can explain for me personally, but I could say that the history of computing probably has opened this up. When you look back at where we were with the big mainframes in the 80s and 90s, you didn't have access to those big computers because they were behind locked doors, they were in raised floor areas.
Yeah.
You had physical security protecting computing. And then about the middle of the 1990s, we started to see distributed processing happening. And that's about the time that we began to see computers on people's desks. And when you stop to think about it, every wire, every computer is a node in the network and a potential vulnerability. But people weren't getting that. And that was really fascinating to me. the first time I realized we had a problem, I was managing the IT installed base at a very large company here in the Northwest. And we were going through a contentious strike. And at the time, the people who were wiring up computers were third shift people. And often they were graduate students at the University of Washington. I mean, these are people that knew what they were doing, but they were getting this new technology we were getting in. And one morning I went to work, and the peg in the patch panel that led to the director of HR's computer, who was also the head of the strike planning committee for management, was laying at the bottom of the patch panel. And I thought,
Yeah, it shouldn't be there.
Shouldn't be there, but could be he had some kind of repair going on.
Right.
A couple days later, same thing. I don't believe in coincidences. So I remember going into my boss saying, you know, this is this new thing, distributed processing here, but I have a feeling somebody's taking messages off his machine. And my boss looked at me like I was an unmedicated paranoid. And he said, Barbara, that's fanciful. And I don't think if I were you, I'd share these kinds of imaginings with just anybody. I'm okay, I'm supporting you, but I'd keep those things to myself. Wow.
Yeah.
I was a young kid.
Yeah.
I went out of his office thinking, wow, won't do that again. But it planted a seed for me because I thought, wow, we're embracing this stuff. I know something is going on. I'm not quite sure what. And that led to other things. And eventually I ended up going back to school. And you know the old saw about curiosity kills the cat?
Yeah. And so
Biting off a doctoral program.
you got catnip.
I got catnip. I had kids in school. I was financing children through college, and so it was a very interesting experience.
Okay, all right.
And I couldn't back out,
Yes.
Eric,
Yes.
because you're like a role model, right?
Yes.
In for a penny, in for a pound.
Right. So, you know, and we might talk more about cybersecurity because I'm very interested in that. Might be another whole show in the future.
Okay.
But can you talk a little bit about what's happened in the field of higher education, you know, following the terrorist attacks of 9/11 and how it relates to emergency management and Homeland Security?
Well, I think that the urban planning department was very aware of a need to teach courses in this space. And with reflection, the head of the department and some of the faculty members recognized that we really did need to include infrastructure in the curriculum. And we needed to think about infrastructure not in the classic ways. Are you preparing for capacity growth? Are you able to resist certain weather events? But also these other things that could possibly happen. Now we have a different world we live in, and we need to be thinking about protecting our systems from terrorist events. Hadn't had to think about that before. And so it resulted in the development of an initial curriculum that was very much oriented toward the man-made disasters kinds of things.
Yeah, human-caused terrorism.
Human-caused events, terrorism, and the vulnerability of infrastructure. So that was the first few years of the program. And then we stepped back and evaluated and said, wait a minute, that's not the only thing going on. We'd had Hurricane Katrina, we had the events of Japan, and we're thinking, you know, there's a bigger picture here.
Yeah, it really made the pendulum swing, I think, self-correct somewhat.
Yes.
Because it had gone way over to terrorism
Right.
after 9/11, and then Katrina swung it back
Right.
more towards a more balanced, all hazards,
Well,
natural hazards.
Same outcomes, just different causes,
Right.
but you need to be prepared from an urban planning, infrastructure
right,
planning perspective.
Right.
So that's the current incarnation of the program, looks at both sides of those equations.
And what's the name of the new program now?
It's a Masters of Infrastructure Planning and Management at the U.
Okay.
And it says it all. We really look at, if you're familiar with urban planning curricula, we look at some of those same ideas. How do you plan in a public space? How do you do accounting? How do you manage systems in a public environment? But also looking specifically at the half dozen infrastructures, I think 4 of which the UN says are absolutely essential for the survival of community. We have a lot of critical infrastructures that have been described and named. I think monuments used to be one, but we've taken it off the list, although I know. But there are some that are more important, I think, to community than others.
Just the power grid, for one.
Correct.
We've seen what the water system in recent
Water
times,
system,
and how
right.
important that is from that standpoint.
The water system, we look at the food system, we look at the communication system and public health,
Okay.
as well as cyber.
Okay. And so, what did you learn from that first program that existed that helped define this new course offering that you have?
I think the major change and the major learning was exactly what you said, that we have other kinds of threats to infrastructure that need to be addressed. Regardless of where you are on the global warming argument,
Yeah.
you can't argue with the fact that we're having extreme weather events, whatever the cause, and you have to pick up afterwards. So we were very aware that we had to expand curriculum to include that. That was one lesson learned. I think another was we had experimented with delivery, and so this is an entirely online degree. And we began the degree at a time when online in universities like UW, they were just learning how to use these tools. So our faculty needed to learn how to use some of these tools and be comfortable with them. Some took to it more than others did. So there was this learning process we had to go through. We also had students that weren't used to learning this way. They're used to stand and deliver
Yeah, they came
in a classroom.
They came out of the classroom.
They came
right.
out of the classroom environment.
Right.
But I will tell you, in the, I guess it's been 7 years or so, maybe longer, since the initial offering, our faculty have certainly grown. I mean, this is more of a common thing now to have a
Right.
hybrid classroom or even an online, even for the University of Washington, a Tier 1 institution. And our students are used to this because look at this program. I mean,
Right.
you're obviously reaching people within the system, you're training people this way. I think people are accustomed to learning online more than they were.
Yeah.
And we're addicted to our cell phones. I mean, those things are amazing. So I think that the student body has shifted, the faculty have shifted, so there's more of a comfort level with online. And the exciting thing about this is we're able to reach students around the world if that's necessary. And I will say that because of the heavy emergency management component of this degree, we have a real attraction from military students, National Guard type students. And those people are deployed constantly, as you know. They're going down to events in Haiti, or they're going here, going there. The beauty of this degree is they can stay on course and finish on time, even if they're deployed.
Yeah. And on the National Guard front, that aspect, and I've heard this from multiple states, not just Washington State here, because the two wars, certainly Iraq we're out of there, and Afghanistan's winding down. The National Guard is looking at, what's our role in this Homeland Security and that, and there is a much more significant emphasis across the nation, again, not just by Washington State National Guard, but all of them on domestic operations. How can they be part of this critical infrastructure? How can they help protect their community, because this is where they live in that. So it's a nice fit for the National Guard.
Well, I tell people when I look at things from a cyber perspective, it's very difficult for me to distinguish between a military target and a civilian target anymore. It's all online. And if you are a significant bad guy and you want to do harm in the U.S., what difference does it make whether you attack a military site, a government site, .com, .edu, it's all the same. You get disruption, you can cause true harm, and that's certainly the case with infrastructure. So the role of the National Guard, I would well imagine, is going to evolve as we look at more of a homeland focus. As I said before, I think Americans have been blessed with two oceans, and it's kept us safe for how many, couple hundred years or more?
Yes.
I mean, the last time the British tried it, what was 1812? Or of course then we had Pearl Harbor, but we've been very blessed compared to other places. So we haven't had to lock things down. I remember a friend of mine from Germany who told me that his father was so shocked coming here to visit when you could just take a rowboat, and you can't do that now, but you could putter up to the Columbia Dam and have a picnic. You couldn't do that in certain parts of the world.
A lot of freedom.
You'd have armed guards. I mean,
Right.
they'd shoot first and ask questions later.
Right.
But that hasn't been our history, and we've been blessed by this.
Okay.
But unfortunately, that's not where we are today.
Okay. Well, listen, surprisingly, we're halfway through our program already.
Oh my goodness, sorry.
So we're going to take a break. And for you folks at home, when we come back after this quick break, we're going to be talking more about the University of Washington's Master of Infrastructure and Planning Management. And stay tuned, and perhaps you're thinking about a degree or advanced degree in emergency management. You'll want to know more, so we'll be right back.
In the event of a catastrophe, you need to know what to do to make it through. By preparing now, you and your family will have a better chance of surviving when a catastrophe happens. Here are 3 tips to get you started. Have an emergency plan with meeting places and an out-of-area contact. Prepare a supply kit for your family and pets that includes what you need to survive for 7 to 10 days. And be prepared to help each other. Start now and take the first step to protect the ones you love. For more information, visit makeitthrough.org or find us on Facebook.
Hi, I'm Eric Holdeman, and if you're just joining us, we're about halfway through our program on a topic of higher education and emergency management and Homeland Security. And the guest today is Barbara Endicott-Popovsky, and professor at University of Washington. And thanks again for being here. This last segment, we want to drill more down into the actual course that University of Washington has, and you're very involved in fielding this. So there's these delivered resident courses and online courses. How is this master's in infrastructure planning and management delivered? Is it all online?
It's entirely online, and the coursework is designed for the working professional, so you could still stay full-time involved. We've measured the workload, and people go 4 quarters, 2 years in a row. So there's no summer off. That way we keep it to 2 courses a quarter if you're going to be full-time in the program. But it's not a full-time load that would require you to leave your work. And we also make sure that the assignments that are due are timed between the 2 professors that teach each quarter, so they don't hit all at once. And this is who we attract. We attract people who are returning adults, although we do have students right out of school who want to take the program as well. The attraction is the urban planning department at UW is highly ranked in the world, and this degree is issued by that same department. And so it's not a paper mill degree. This is an academic degree with some academic rigor, but the workload is manageable for full-time people. The courses are structured in the first year, so we have some urban planning classes as well as tools that you would use as an urban planner. We teach GIS, we teach financial planning,
and
etc.
GIS is computer mapping.
Yes, it's computer mapping. Everybody's using this these days. And then in the second year, we get into the 6 infrastructures, and then the students pick 1 or 2, or maybe more that they want to specialize in, and they come up with a special project. We work with the students to find public organizations or industries that want to work with them on a capstone so they deliver something meaningful, and that serves almost like an internship on your resume.
And so, you know, some people maybe are a little hesitant. You know, I've never actually I've done some online work with FEMA, that type of thing, but not a degree program. How does the collaboration work between students when you're not in a physical classroom setting?
You'd be amazed. I mean, the students form teams. They go through the program as a cohort. They get to know each other extremely well. It's funny, at graduation this year, there were 3 or 4 that had been working on a team, had never met each other. They were coming from different parts of the country. They flew out here for graduation. They finally met each other face to face, and it was a wonderful, exciting moment. But believe me, you learn from others in the class. These are working people, and you learn as much from them as you do from the professors.
And do you have international students?
We do. I mean, the online degree allows us to have international students. We have 1 young woman from Germany this year. I mentioned that we have Americans that are traveling around the world that participate.
And so you mentioned, you know, it's not a diploma mill, but what's the level of effort? I mean, I was a history major with a lot of reading. A lot of reading, and I remember I had 4 history courses in 1 quarter once. I thought I was going to die because I was reading a book a week or so. But you talked a little bit about the lever, but are there papers to write continuously and books to be read? And
There's papers, there's books. Typically, you budget 2 hours outside of class, and by class I mean you have a set of videos and readings that you do that prepare you for the week's topic, and then you're expected on your own to spend on top of that about 2 to 3 additional hours for every credit you take, if that's
Okay.
so. You take 6 credits a quarter, so that's about 18 hours.
Yeah,
12 to 18 hours. I don't want to scare people because I do know, having gone back to school as a working adult more than once and kept my job each time, including when I was working on my doctorate, you can do this. You ramp up. Your first semester, you're getting into the groove of it. By the second semester, you think, how can I make it? Halfway through the semester, things pick up and it becomes habit.
Right.
By the time it's over, you're surprised it's over, and I get students saying, I'm going to miss this.
Yeah.
I miss my friends, I miss the activity.
Yeah, the academic
So
rigor.
it's the, you know, you ramp up, but if you have a commitment and you know where you're going, it
Okay.
carries you.
And so what types of career paths? We talked some about the National Guard, it's a nice fit there, but it's in the urban planning thing. So what types of career paths could someone have
Well,
from this?
that's an interesting question because we're seeing emerging careers in this space. They may not necessarily have infrastructure in the title, but various urban planning positions, for example, have expectation that you have some of the knowledge or the skills. I'm also seeing industry being very concerned about critical infrastructure, consumption of energy, green power. Emergency preparedness is an important part of any large corporation's planning. They do disaster recovery, business continuity. So those kinds of jobs in industry are there. Recently, our graduating class, we had a young woman that took an executive position at the city because she understood policy in this space, and they put her to work right away. They valued what she had. We had students who already were in public service of some sort, but have been able to transition to more responsibility focused on the new information that they have.
Okay. And you know, you mentioned global warming, climate change, you know, that we actually did a program earlier on that topic, and a good neutral term is climate variability.
Yes.
That, I mean, it isn't the cause, it's just the
No.
fact it's getting warmer, so what's going to happen?
Right.
In the emergency management side, we call it consequence management. How much of the curriculum is oriented on getting prepared to deal with, I interested in doing more a show on this, more on climate adaptation.
Right.
And that.
We have a complete course in that. We're looking at all aspects, including things like carbon accounting, which is being levied in the public sector. There's debate about what causes this.
Yes,
Lively
right,
debate in the
right,
classroom is
right.
probably one of the most exciting discussion forums. But we talk about the realities that need to be worked into your planning process. So it's a factor with what we do.
Okay. And kind of going back to cyber, we were talking about not recognizing the vulnerability, and you're certainly an expert in this, but I'll tell you a quick story. This is probably, 10 years ago when information management systems were becoming popular to use in emergency operations centers where you go to respond to a disaster. So you'd have this IT support displays, some computer mapping and all that. And it was interesting, the leading provider, kind of nationally known system, we were looking to purchase for King County and Seattle and for this region. And Seattle wisely said, well, let's look at the security for it. And it was a wonderful system, but it absolutely had no security at all. It had been designed without security
Correct.
as an element of it. Kind of going back to what you said, we started doing these things not with a sense of
Yes.
having a lock on the barn door.
Correct.
You know, type of thing. So it is interesting to see again and again. Now there's not just casual things, there's actually a criminal element out there trying to break in. You have national countries, organizations where the criminal or just countries themselves China's well known to do this type of exploitation of that. So I would think it's a huge field that's not going to go away given our digital
It's
age.
not going away. In fact, I'm wearing my DEF CON t-shirt. I thought I'd do it for this occasion. There is a conference in Las Vegas every year where the white hat hackers show up and
Okay.
discuss exactly what you're talking about,
Right.
I can tell you in my lifetime, we're not going to get on top of this.
Okay. So we got a couple minutes left, and I wanted to touch on this because it's always an element today. Is, what cost is always a consideration. So can you talk briefly about what's the financial obligation to get a degree like we've been talking about, and any financial aid to support that?
This is not my area in terms of how much the costs are this year because they've been changing, but it's a reasonably priced master's degree. It tends to be a bargain master's.
Okay.
The University of Washington is considered a public Ivy. It means that it ranks with the Harvards and the MITs, but it's in the public sector. So the cost is lower. I would think it's around, if I gave a number,
Well, probably don't
right.
give a number.
I
But
shouldn't, but it's reasonably cost.
Okay, all right.
And the students who apply, of course, there's financial aid, always has been for universities.
Okay.
But there's also scholarship programs that are available. We have one kind of scholarship that people can apply for. It's fairly competitive. But we also have the military benefits. We have several people on GI Bill benefits,
Okay.
and that's a possibility as well.
All right. And we're out of time.
All right.
It goes quickly, amazingly. So, Barbara, I just want to say thank you for being on the show. And you're our first guest to get the Disaster Zone coffee mug. We'll be handing this
Wow.
out at the end of each show to our guests. So every time you get a cup of coffee or tea or whatever you have, think about the program. And thanks for being on and sharing everything with folks at home.
Well, I appreciate the mug, and I appreciate, Eric, that you've given me the opportunity to explain the UW's program to the audience.
Well, thank you.
Thank you.
And this brings us to the end of our show for today. Thanks for tuning in, learning more about what you and others can do to become better prepared for disasters, like getting an education and a degree in it. And remember, if you're going to get prepared, today is a good day to start. Have a great day, and see you next time. Bye-bye.